Intelligence in the financial industry, the better normal. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to our third Frankfurt Digital Finance web panel. I'm Corinna, founder of Frankfurt Digital Finance, which is a new conference format that brings together digital finance expertise. Our aim is to connect. We connect people from different players of the financial industry, corporate startups, politics, as well as investors, regulators, and academia. We connect topics. We discuss the most relevant digital finance themes. And last but not least, we connect ecosystems. Frankfurt with other top European digital finance hubs. Our motto is better together. We are looking back to a successful first conference edition this past February and a couple of web panels on ecosystems and payments. And we're very happy to have you all here with us today to discuss artificial intelligence in the financial industry. We want to discuss how the crisis, or maybe better said, the different crises and developments have affected the AI industry lately. What is the status quo of developments in artificial intelligence? Which parts will accelerate? And how are we getting prepared for that? And does AI have more impact on the business side, meaning product development and consumer behavior? Or is the real treasure more in the backwards direction, fraud detection, regulation, and financial supervision? Then we want to talk about cloud infrastructure. To what extent do European standards foster development on a global level? Robust, ethical, responsible AI, are those only buzzwords? We will take an outlook, medium and long term. Ladies and gentlemen, you see, we have a lot to talk about. So we will get started right away. But before we begin, just a couple of organizational details. Our panel will last approximately 60 minutes. And we'll start with some questions from my side and then turn over to you, your audience questions. Just that you know, you as our audience, you're neither visible to us nor can we hear you, but you are certainly invited. And I do encourage you to do so, to ask questions anytime you feel like you want to do that, and just do that via the Q&A or F&A button that you have on your screen. You might also want to say to whom of the panelists the question goes to. So let's get started. According to our motto, better together, we certainly do have panelists from very different backgrounds with us today, and I'm sure it will be a very exciting discussion. So let me introduce. First of all, Claire Helfer de Soir. She is a true European, originally from Paris. She moved to Germany years ago and worked for British telecom and IT organizations serving financial institutions with their infrastructure needs. Now she's at NVIDIA, which is a solution provider for clouds, both in the US as well as in Europe. And she's based in Berlin and responsible for enterprise sales, finance, and insurance Germany. And she says, I fell into the amazing world of AI, which to me is a real disruptor in the finance industry. She's mother of 3, and her main hobby is triathlon. So I guess that is where her perseverance with the financial industry comes from. Welcome, Claire. Good to have you here.
Karina.
So our gentlemen panelists, I will introduce in alphabetical order. And so first it goes to Fabian Biegel, who has been with SAP for 15 years and is serving today in the role as Executive Director for Digital Transformation in the Office of SAP's CEO. As part of that, he's been instrumental in initiating GAIA-X, the European initiative for sovereign data infrastructure in Europe. And he's leading the expert tribe on business requirement and mechanics, and is serving as a designated member of the board of directors of the GAIA-X Foundation. Welcome, Fabian. Good to have you here.
Thank you very much. Hello.
From the public authority side, we have Dr. Stefan Breth with us today. And he's Director General Economic Sector, Financial Services and Exchanges at the Ministry of Economics, Energy, Transport and Housing in the state of Hesse. He leads, among others, the development of the Financial Center Frankfurt, the supervision of the Frankfurt exchanges and the public banks, in particular the savings banks, the state bank, and the development banks. And prior to that, he worked for Deutsche Bahn and the German Parliament. Welcome, Stefan. Good to have you with us today. So we're still missing Dr. Shivaji Dasgupta from Deutsche Bank, but just continue without him. And as soon as he's in here, I'll introduce him. So the last one is Dr. Jochen Papenbrock, and he's a fintech entrepreneur and a researcher in applied artificial intelligence and data science. His personal mission, I would say, explainable and robust AI. He's founder and CEO of think tank Viramis, a B2B fintech company for customer-specific software applications based on AI and data science for the financial services industry. He also is a member of the executive board of fintech in the EU Horizon 2020 project, and he's also vice chairman and founder of the association AI in Financial Services. And last but not least, I do want to say something. Jochen has been among the most important supporters in setting up Frankfurt Digital Finance for the first time this year. And we are very grateful for that. Thank you very much, Jochen. Good to have you here with us today.
Hi to everyone, and thanks, Corinna, for having me.
And I see Shivaji, good to have you with us. So I'm introducing you as the last one now, but certainly not least. And Dr. Shivaji Dasgupta is Global Head of Data Products and Artificial Intelligence at Deutsche Bank, and he is responsible for data monetization and using data as asset across all divisions of the bank. That includes data strategy, relevance to architecture and cloud technology, as well as new business models. He's also chairman of the working group of the European Banking Federation for Data Economy in Brussels. And before joining Deutsche Bank, he worked in the insurance industry, in the media industry, as well as in business consulting. And he studied physics in New Delhi and well, then moved to Munich to obtain his doctorate from the Technical University there. And well, he still lives in that beautiful city. Welcome, Shivaji. Good to have you with us today.
Thanks so much.
All right, to begin the discussion, I'd just like to ask all of you for a 30 seconds statement, just a short statement. And I'd like to know how have the developments during the past months, like COVID-19, like the Wirecard scandal, like other movements or developments have affected your business, your work until now. Just give us a few spotlights on the status quo, on business relationships with customers, investors, or partners, whatever comes to your mind. And well, Shivaji, I would say I put you last in, so you're the first. just get started with you.
So very briefly, I think I would just highlight two things, right? I mean, the first crisis that you mentioned, COVID, has put the entire digital agenda on the top of our minds. And that is something that has changed. And we are actually seeing a lot of movement on everything that we are doing, on all the operations that we are doing, whether it's starting from the customer or the backend operations, how to digitize it, how to bring it as close to a more digital model that possible. Specific to AI, that also has its probably reawakening, let's say, in these kind of times, because all these digital activities is giving a lot of data touch points. The other scandal that you mentioned, the Wirecard, that also increases the regulations around, or at least the expectation that the regulation is going to increase, which for AI, again, the models as well as how data is being used, that's more in focus. But I would say that always was. For banking especially, we are not really taking that much of a detour around that. So yeah, those two aspects around it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jochen.
Yeah, I think the digital agenda has improved according to the COVID situation, of course, because we are all aware that these digital tools are really helpful when we had to move to the conferences. And I think we will see more of these devices like virtual reality meeting or whatever. So that was a plus, actually. Of course, the business is going down to some extent. Budgets are frozen. Of course, that's the negative aspects of such a pandemic. But at the same time, we have also seen some interesting developments regarding the use of data. For example, the Black Lives Matter movement and policing AI, let's say. So people are more aware of AI and its dangers and how biased AI can be. And at the moment in Europe, and this is also what we experience in our EU project on the risk management of AI, we see a lot more sensibility regarding trustworthiness of AI, use of data, and that we have our own agenda here in Europe about responsible use of AI, basically.
Lea, you see both the European and the US market as well, I said in my introduction. So what about your opinion to that?
Mm. Well, I mean, basically exactly the same as what Shivaji mentioned. We've seen the digital agenda booming in the finance industry, even though there are some hurdles around budgeting it due to the financial situation and the situation with banks are quite now. NVIDIA, we have a bit of a special situation, as we've been also seeing the gaming business booming, but that's more of a side comment. It's not our subject today. Yeah, I think also maybe on a more high level view is that I think we're learning a lot about how we can actually change and adapt to new situation. And I think that's a good surprise, because if you had asked me like 7 months ago if I would be able to start in a new company working from home without meeting anyone, without meeting the customer, without meeting the partners, at home permanently without any human interaction, either not real human interaction, everything virtual, I would have said that sounds impossible. And actually that works. I mean, the economy keeps working like that. So that would be my main takeaway, really.
Mm-hmm. Fabian.
Thank you. So as Jochen and Claire already pointed out, I think the COVID crisis showed us that we in Germany and we in Europe, we were not prepared for such a disruption of our daily lives and our economy, how we are used to it. So, I mean, home office is one example, as Claire already mentioned, homeschooling, the virtual conferences we have, etc. And what we saw is that those who mastered the crisis are digital companies, as Shiv already said. So the digitization got a real momentum, but the companies, organizations that were already used to digital processes, using digital software, including SAP, for instance, they were managing the crisis quite well so far. I mean, we are not through. But what became clear even more is that those who benefited from the crisis are digital platforms, are those ones who are enabling us collaborating virtually, the social media platforms, etc., and also NVIDIA, as Claire just mentioned. But on the other hand side, we also see those digital platforms are not in Germany and not in Europe, at least the majority of them. So for us, this is actually a plea, or also one reason that should make us think and should drive us to build up our own capabilities, digital capabilities for everyone, but also especially in the cloud and digital platform business. And this includes AI, this includes digital competencies, this includes cloud applications, etc.
Mm-hmm. Stefan, let's hear from the governmental side and digitization there. And you're certainly also involved in the GAIA-X, the financial big data cluster. So let's hear about that.
We were also stress tested in the first half of the year with the COVID crisis, and it was interesting to see as also we as administration could switch within 1 week from very limited home office, etc., to full home office working. So that was an interesting experience. And on top, we really had a kickoff of 2 AI projects for us that were creating a lot of work. The one you just mentioned is the Financial Big Data Cluster project, where together with many actors from the financial center and technical and IT companies, we built the financial project for the GAIA-X project, and we will talk about that later. But that was a real lot of work, everything only on web conferences. Yeah, and the other one, we were starting the AI Competence Center in Hesse, which is a network of universities, and which will start at the end of this year, and the government will allocate quite a lot of money. And all this had to be done within the new framework. And we learned that we must improve a lot our infrastructure, but still I can say it all worked. So it's not hopeless. We can do it. And I think with the new project, we can really make a leap ahead. All right.
Glad to hear that the stress test has worked. When I said in my introduction shift, I said that Claire thought AI was a real disruptor to the financial industry. So why have AI providers then not yet really conquered banking in Germany? Just tell us your perspective about that.
Well, that's an interesting question. So, I mean, the AI providers require one raw substance to actually provide the results, and that's the data. To provide any sort of insight or any sort of modeling, the background or the foundations are required in data. And that's something which the banks have still more or less the contact to the customers. And that is what we are also investing a lot in, so that we maintain that trust of the customers, that we maintain the interface with the customers. And that's going to be the differentiator, where we as banks can then provide these solutions to our customers and also bring these topics for the advantage of the customers. And that's why I think there's a lot of positive that we can do as banks in partnership with the AI providers or tech providers. But the tech and the AI providers alone, they still would have to get to the customer interface to collect these data points. And that's where we have still an edge on that.
Is it more a German or a European challenge, in your opinion?
Not really. I think if you look at the world also, right? I mean, in the US, many of these big tech / AI providers that you're talking about, they are also working in partnership with other banks or with other financial providers to provide customers these kind of solutions. It's not a singular move on the part of these big tech companies to capture that interface.
Mm-hmm. All right. Claire, you said that originally. So what was in your mind when you said that?
Well, yes, definitely the data is key. What we've seen so far, I mean, but at NVIDIA, we've been helping our customer to develop AI projects for more than 10 years now. And the areas where it's quite advanced so far is mostly around trading. So algorithmic trading, the pricing teams, quant teams, risk management. And I think it's because the data is already there and available, because it's been an evolution from data analytics to machine learning to more and more complex AI systems. But it's market data, mostly it's all reference data, it's public data. So you don't, and generally they're already located somewhere in quite concentrated way in a data center run by the bank. If you look at use cases going more in the consumer business around retail banking or online banking, you're touching on personal data of consumers. And that's a totally different topic, because first of all, that data is more difficult to access. It might be split around a variety of systems. It might also be fragmented over different locations. It's not easy to extract. And there are also, of course, regulations and transparency expectations from the citizens about what you do with this data and how you manipulate it and how you move it. So, and I think this is, as Shivaj mentioned, that the difficulty of implementing AI solution large scale.
Mm-hmm. So if we leave the status quo for a moment and look, take a little outlook a little further, maybe to the next 3 or 6 months, medium-term expectation, we all know the one side of AI that can present banks completely new business opportunities. Actually, are they more on the product development side? Are they more on the customer insight side? Where is the most likely area? So, Shiv, what would you think, or what are you looking at the most?
So I think it's a mix, right? I think the last few years, the focus has been a lot on the marketing. But as I think in one of the conferences, one colleague said, if with one of the most advanced technologies that we have today, the best thing that we can produce is the next best offer, then we are doing something wrong, right? So, I mean, marketing is an interesting use case. Obviously, no offense, but we have to look at more broader use cases. And that's, I think, where we are moving towards. Customer interfaces. And I agree to what Claire was saying, that there is a lot of external data, there's a lot of publicly available data, but that needs to still be brought into context of the customers, whether it's in trading, whether it's in corporate banking, whether it's also bringing data, as we are talking to Fabian and all the other options around GAIA-X, cross-industry data to bring the real opportunities to the customers. So to your question, I think there's a whole breadth of topics where we are seeing a lot of opportunities. I would say the strongest area is probably around process optimization internally and product development. So process optimization for existing products, and then as the next big one, the new products or new services that we can develop.
And what about the fraud detection side?
I'm sorry.
Fraud detection?
Yes, that I would put under the existing process optimization. So you have the current processes for fraud detection, AML, KYC, all these kind of onboarding, customer servicing. For all these processes, I think you can have a massive improvement with data as first, and also use of data with AI as the second step.
And when you say the next best offer, are those offers outside the core banking products you're also thinking about, or is it more the financial products?
No, so right now we are focusing on the core banking product, and there's a lot we can do with that. So bringing the existing bank products to the customers, but we are also looking at the non-banking offers. So we have started partnering, for example, with tax software provider to provide customers an easy access or easy options to perform their tax using their own data with consent and through an API, just fulfilling via ML and AI options, their tax forms. And those kind of options and those kind of offers are there for customers. For sure, there's a lot more that we can do there. But as I said, I think if I were to force rank, then I would say process optimization, product development, and new products, new services.
Okay, well, that's great. Thank you. Stefan, there's another side or another use case that for supervision. So how would you say what is going to happen in the next months? And I mean, how would you solve problems like the what we call the explanatory gap, the reliable relation between input and output? Are these topics big ones for the next months, or is it a long-term thing? Unmute, please. Yes,
sorry.
yes, now we hear you.
Yeah, thanks. In fact, it's both. We found that we have a lot of data silos for the supervisory authorities. Everyone has one, the ECB, the BaFin, the Bundesbank, we as the exchange supervisory authority, and more. And there are more commercial data around. And if we want to understand very complex trade patterns and then fraud within, market manipulation, money laundering, etc., we must try to connect these data. And that is why we have in our financial big data cluster project also 2 streams with anti-money laundering measures and with market manipulation, where we try to understand how we can use big data, a combination of more data, within our legal framework and with AI applications to fight better against fraud. And we must find ways with data anonymization and with federated learning and all these modern ways, as we suffer, as we think as of today, from a more restrictive legal framework in Europe compared to China or the US. And we need improvement here, as AI improves quickly for companies, new products, etc., but also, of course, for fraud, etc. And the supervisory authorities, they really must join strengths and make progress to keep up with. So we hope to see within 1 year, that's our fast track, to see a fast demonstrator project, which we can show and show improvement really. And of course, we have a more long-term, mid-term perspective, 3 years, with the FBDC, where we want to have more final products. So that's our 2 perspectives.
Mm-hmm. Let me just take or get back to one thing you've mentioned in your first comment, the AI Competence Center in Hesse that you've just, how do you say, launched or introduced to all of us. What will be the major, actually, expected results for the financial industry here? And next question, why does that have to be on a Hessian level and is not on a national level or a European level?
This new competence center we started because we had some analysis about the strengths in AI in Hessen and in the regions, and we were by international firms advised to really join and connect our forces, as we would have good research in many universities, which is really of a good standard, and many interesting activities cross sectors industry-wise, but that would be not enough connected so far. So what we now set up is a joint network of our universities and a lot of companies, but not also, of course, Hessen, but we have the Deutsche Center for Intelligence, Artificial Intelligence Research is in, and also international partners and Fraunhofer Institutes, etc. It's of course based here, but it has partners globally also. So don't misunderstand. It's a project which is really supposed to have a global standard, and it will start from next year, and it will benefit from 20 new professors in AI. It will have a new education for AI for students to bring them on the top level, as we suffer from a lack of AI trained students here. We also finance research and of course transfer, and what we already also want to focus in the startup and startup activities of students and researchers. So we put in from our state of Hessen annually then 12 million. And we will get in hopefully much more leverage from industry finance. And we will have one big center at the Technical University of Darmstadt and one here in Frankfurt. That will be the 2 major physical hubs. We want to grow the activities. And I think finance, as we have also finance partners within, and players like TechWord will of course play a major role in it.
Okay, well, a collaboration project between the public and for the private side, and so let's move to another one that is like that, and talk about clouds and data infrastructure for a moment. Deutsche Bank has announced strategic global partnership with Google Cloud SAP, as I mentioned in my introduction, is the founding member of the European entity of GAIA-X, and NVIDIA as provider of AI computing power is the cloud and on-premise in both the US and in Europe. So Fabian, I said a public-private partnership project. Why did we need a European cloud?
I actually don't think that we needed European cloud, but
that's interesting.
Yeah, that is exactly the point. I mean, going back to the initial origin of what led us to GAIA-X now in the end, and Shivaji's boss Bernd Leukert was instrumental to that. Actually began with AI, because that was exactly what this already has been elaborated on. For AI, we need data. And to be excellent in machine learning, we need data, and we need to share data. And the infrastructures we currently have at hand for that are usually the ones from US or Chinese hyperscalers. I mean, there are only a few who are capable to provide us the full service, but also the performance and the capabilities to do so. And that was the first question, whether that is actually an issue for Germany and for Europe. And that was the starting point that led us to what later became GAIA-X. And we actually thought about different options we have after analyzing the situation. As said, this all began with out of a thinking of protectionism and isolation, but I mean, that is not what we wanted to achieve. So we rather thought of what can we do, and how should the next generation of cloud and digital infrastructures look like? And one option would be one European cloud, as you just described. So building one European hyperscaler, however we would be able to do so. But would it have changed the situation? Maybe not, because then we would have just another fifth hyperscaler besides the four we already have, which would have maybe the advantage that it is on European ground and is subject to European law, but we would still have one dominant player, another dominant player in that ecosystem, which would still cause a lock in to what we are doing and to our capabilities. So we rather thought of, okay, how would we imagine as a European cloud infrastructure? And that is maybe the difference based on the European values. And that rather led us to an ecosystem of different cloud service providers, on data providers on the infrastructure side. That's what we are doing with GAIA-X, and you might be familiar or have seen that that X we are usually using to describe what we are doing, and that is the lower part of the X. And in the beginning, it had pretty little arms on the upper side, which is the data ecosystem. But we pretty quickly got aware that this is exactly what we need to strengthen. Also the capabilities on the data ecosystem side, and make sure that we can all benefit from data. And that is the more exciting thing to do, rather than just looking at cloud infrastructures, but looking at what is the benefit that data can bring to us and data sharing can bring to us. And this is why we have much strengthened also the data ecosystem part of GAIA-X, where we are working together on so data sovereignty and data exchange based on a trusted infrastructure below. And that's what we are doing with GAIA.
Mm-hmm. Stefan, you already mentioned your financial big data cluster sponsorship. You are working with that, and maybe you want to add a couple of sentences for that important area of GAIA. Again, the mute, please.
Sorry.
All right.
Yeah, thanks. In fact, the Financial Big Data Cluster project is the financial domain project of GAIA-X. That's where we have about 30, 40 participants from the financial sector, but also beyond. And the idea here is to also find standardization and modes of data sharing and AI training, so that all participating institutions can learn on an entrusted institutional level. And we found from our members that there are very, very different use cases. For example, sustainable finance, which is a big topic to come, needs still a huge database. We learned that from our participants, about 90% of the data used for sustainable finance evaluations of companies is not based on real data, but are estimations. And of course, it is not a valuable way to go ahead on such a standard, but we must really develop a standard for developing sustainable finance data. And with we want to set standards here. We want to also then provide AI solutions for using this data. So there's a huge interest, and we have Refinitiv and huge players globally in here in the project who will provide data and help developing. But also, for example, in the Industry 4.0, which is about one of the famous examples is printing products. Yeah, it needs a complete new understanding of a management of data inflow of what is going to be printed and finance outflow, what is to be bought and financed. And in such a production process, you sometimes need 120 or more, 200 different products, and you need payment lines and risk management lines, which really needs a new and much more complex system, and where AI can help to manage such a process and really develop new and better products. And then we have what we talked about, fraud detection, etc. So it's really fascinating to see what kind of ideas and needs come above. And the point is, we have a lot of data here. It's just they're sitting in silos, and we must find under these regulations a way to cooperate. It's really a long thing. We have Bundesbank and with us and other regulatory authorities because they also want to learn what is happening if all the banks move into the cloud now. Huh? Everyone is moving step by step, because of course the services offered there are really valuable. But we must understand what does it mean really for the regulations trend. I think our FBDC and GAIA-X is a very valuable field where we can test and develop that. So I think we will see here hopefully a common standard cross-sector then. That's why we are with the FBDC within GAIA-X. And SAP, Deutsche Bank, etc. We're all working with. We are really happy, and we must here in Germany really get ahead more quickly now to be in front of digitalization and AI, because we also had a check on where do our best students go in Germany from AI trend, etc. And they disappear to the. We have not enough first, and second, those we have, they disappear to the American companies. And Deutsche Bank, in fact, was the first from the finance sector on place number 50 to appear in the line, you know, where they go. So we must be more attractive again also.
Now that they see Shift today, they will they will rethink their decision. Jochen, you are also involved with the FBDC, so I would like to ask you: can you give us a couple of examples, use cases, maybe a little bit of the link to the industry of the project?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what has been discussed before by Mr. Breth and by Mr. Biegel and others was this, you know, this ecosystem and learning. And I think this is really important. There are so many use cases that we could test out there, but in the end, many of them also fail. So we need this, you know, this repetition of testing. So, because there's also risk management involved. There are so many disciplines involved to make a good use case. And this is also something that we experience in our EU project on the risk management of big data, AI, and finance. There were so many, so we did so many knowledge exchange sessions across Europe with the financial service industry in fintech hubs, and also with the supervisory authorities in Europe, and so many people coming together, lawyers, data scientists, so many backgrounds, you know. So in the end, it was a huge learning experience. And this is why we need these ecosystems and these platforms to have sort of also a sandbox environment where we can test new use cases. Yeah. And coming to your question, I think one of the most prominent things where we can use machine learning and have more test cases is explanation of performance of investment, like robo-advisory and asset management companies, for example. So I think these guys are more and more using high-performance computing environments, accelerated AI, to really simulate and test, like in a wind tunnel or wind channel, their investment strategies. So this is one important aspect. And they also include so-called market generator AI. So this is something where you use AI to generate or simulate financial markets. And it looks like, you know, real scenarios of financial markets, but they have never been observed before. So you have many, many realistic scenarios you generate. So it's this risk management thinking, and you can use AI for that. So this is one of the, I would say, synthetic data or generation of or generative AI. This is one of the use cases for asset management, but also, you know, the synthetic data generation could also be used in other use cases. For example, scoring or fraud detection, for example. Yeah, so this is something, whenever you have a lack of data or you cannot use data because of privacy issues, you might consider to artificially generate data. Yeah. And coming back to your question again with the use cases, I think these risk management functions in banks. I mean, banks are still risk management experts and insurance companies. So to use AI in risk management and also for regulatory compliance, I think this is very important. And this goes beyond AML and fraud detection. You can do so much more. For example, tracking also your reputational risk, operational risk, all these things. So what banks are good at risk management functions, you can improve them using data and AI.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Shiv, Fabian in the beginning said that, well, we did not really need a European cloud. So what are the advantages or maybe risks on the other side in using existing hyperscalers cloud models? Like you have the Google cloud model with Deutsche Bank. I'm not going to ask you to explain that in detail, but in general, what is the, what is the advantage?
I mean, the biggest advantage is using the services as a whole, right? I mean, previously when people would talk about cloud till about a couple of years back, you were mostly talking about outsourcing your infrastructure into the cloud. Now you're talking about the entire platform, not just the infrastructure, but actually the applications as well. I think quite a few people in the conference have already now mentioned that the applications on the cloud, whether it's for AI, whether it's for data usage, are kind of best in class because they are just learning from so many different data sources. Just take, for example, speech to text or text recognition. If we were to build that kind of software ourselves, we would have to use so much of test data as well as so many different languages. There's no point in trying to build that ourselves if we can use managed services for that on the cloud and just integrate that into our operations. That's, for me, the real change or the real disruption, if I may use the word, for the IT operations, where we can actually use integrated operations from application as well as infrastructure on the cloud. And that's where I see the biggest advantage from the hyperscalers.
Mm-hmm. Claire, maybe you take the risk part. You see both worlds as well. So what do you say about that?
Yeah, we definitely see both trends. I would tend to say from the largest project we've been working on, especially on fraud detection with the likes of PayPal or American Express or Visa, on very, very large scale fraud detection projects. It's typically run into large GPU clusters, so more of a high performance computing environment on premise. Where we see very broad cloud adoption, it's within the fintech community, because it's very convenient. If you're developing and starting a company, you always have a cash flow issue, and the cloud provider is very good at just providing you some easy to access infrastructure. So it's very flexible. And I think also for larger organizations, this flexibility is a lot worth. And as Shivaj mentioned, I think the key is really the software stack that comes on top. And at NVIDIA, we've developed a platform which you can implement wherever you want. So it doesn't play any role if you want to do it on site in an existing server, if you want to go for our own DGX appliance, or if you want to develop in the cloud, you'll be using exactly the same software stack, the same environment, the same containers, and we work very closely with cloud providers to make it compatible, and so that you can easily toggle from one environment to the other. So I would tend to think that it's not a cloud versus on-premise. There will always be use case where it makes sense to build your own cluster or your own computing cluster and run it. And there will be cases where it makes a lot of sense to go in the cloud. Important is to keep the possibility to run hybrid and not being stuck or being trapped in a type of solution that doesn't allow you to move from one environment to the other.
Fabian, well, one environment to the other. I'm just taking this as a statement. The recent judgment of the European Court of Justice on the Privacy Shield, was that like was that accelerating your project a little bit?
At least it got us a lot of awareness, again, another momentum because of that ruling. So, but as I have said in the beginning, I mean, we came out of the thinking of U.S. Cloud Act, protectionism, trade wars, etc., etc., and that also relates then to the Privacy Shield issue. We rather think of it now of how to really make use of data and also exchanging data across borders. And that is definitely one aspect where the Privacy Shield ruling was of importance. I mean, we do not want to share data only on a European basis. I mean, a lot of companies that are part of the GAIA network and the ecosystem are either global companies, or, as you may know, we have also quarterly invited other companies from US, from China, from South Korea, Japan, etc., to join GAIA. And I think I can reveal that we will have also partners from all over the world in the legal entity, but already have in the GAIA-X community. And we need, on the one hand side, a trusted infrastructure that ensures data sovereignty among the partners and across the ecosystem. But this also includes that we have the regulatory frameworks in place so that it allows us to share data and to treat data trustworthy on a global basis. And that also includes the Privacy Shield or any successor that may replace the current one.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Jochen, you mentioned in the beginning, I think it was that that movement of Black Lives Matter. And well, ever since then, probably words like ethical, responsible, robust AI have really been talked about more. So how would you describe the latest developments there, and where these standards developed in your opinion? Is that a European driven thing, or does it come from somewhere else?
It could be. I mean, those terms have unfortunately turned to buzzwords already, but there's something very important in them. So trustworthy, ethical, also explainable AI is something that's really on the agenda. And actually, it's also something that we treated very intensively in our EU project, especially the explainability of these black box machine learning models. If you look at the recent publications, for example, by European supervisors like EBA, ECB, Banque de France, Bank of England, everybody is pointing to this transparency, explainability issue. And I think the financial service companies have to make sure that they understand what they do with data and with the analytics behind it, because otherwise there will be problems with supervisors, I guess. So we need this transparency, and it creates this trust. And I mean, that's what banking and financial services is all about, right? banking means trust, and when we transform the banking industry to more digital, more data-driven, we need to maintain the trust. And the good thing is that many solutions have been developed in the past 2 years, basically, and it's really just launching. Is let's say AI checking AI. So you have models, technologies to check if your model is biased, if your data is biased, if you have models and technologies to open up this black box and see inside what's going on. Why is this decision made, for example? And this is very important for trust building and for the European citizens, because they have a right to understand what algorithmic decision making is doing to them. And it's good that we have these technologies, and I hope those kinds of explainability technologies will also enter the FBDC and other nice ecosystem initiatives. And by the way, you also need a lot of power for that, because explaining a complex black box model takes another model. So you need this accelerated computing. This will be good news for Claire, I guess, and others. Yeah. So this is the trend that I'm currently observing. So it is buzzwords, yes, unfortunately, but it's very important in the future that we as Europeans have a known approach to trustworthiness and explainability, and maybe we can export these approaches and technologies to other countries.
Mm-hmm. So, having heard that, we started talking about the status quo and then medium-term expectations. Now we've talked about cloud. Let's just move on to, because time is certainly running, to long-term expectations. Stefan, what would you think would be the 3 main drivers for the AI industry would be for the long term?
I think that one driver hopefully really will be the public sector, because we have seen now that we need a complete different setup, more capable of digitalization, etc. And we have seen that in the US, for example, but also in China. It was a very strong public push for new companies, which set up then, which in fact were asked to develop programs in AI and other things for security reasons, etc. Yeah. Palantir has been grown by this way and others. And now we in Europe, we buy these products and take these companies in. But we should develop our companies also here, the European potential, develop it really and see what we can do, because it will be very important that we still have the skills, etc. I mean, it is not so, it's not so much the question as was said that we use hyperscalers from US or somewhere else, but we must understand what is happening. We must have the programs to check the security and really understand what's going on. So I hope we don't have a fallback when COVID is over and everything returns back to his office and it goes on as it was before. No, we must really take the opportunity. And that concerns all different sectors. I mean, look at traffic, for example. I think maybe now we've understood that it's maybe not intelligent that everyone at 7 o'clock in the morning is jumping in the car and we are all in traffic jams on the streets. But and from 9 o'clock on, it's over and everything is free. But we must develop intelligent solutions. So that's a public side differently. Then company side, we must create, I mean, the structural changes on. We must develop like autonomous driving, etc. and see. So we must put good legislation and companies together. That's the second big driver. We have seen now the chancellor and the car companies that sit together and make, let's be the first in the world to have autonomous driving in Germany set up. And that needs a good legislation together with the companies. With really trust and cooperation here. That will be the next thing. Yeah? And then, of course, we need excellent education. So we must improve our capabilities in AI training and development. So those would be my 3 points.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Shiv, for the bank, which business area will actually monetize long-term, in your opinion, the most? Just move to the other side.
Which business area would monetize? I mean,
yeah, for AI, where's the biggest fish?
Well, as I was saying, I mean, there's applications everywhere, right? I mean, you will find applications, right, in the process optimization, product development, and every single product that we are seeing has so much that you can actually use. But I would probably support what Stefan was saying around the public sector and go one step further. I think in the last couple of years, what you've seen is the B2C interface. I wouldn't say the B2C sector is completely taken, but the B2C sector interface, the technologies there are more or less available from the American or the Chinese platforms. The area where we as Europe have a chance to create a new footprint is the B2B area. And I think that's where GAIA-X or any sort of these kind of initiatives where we can bring different sectors together, different industries together, I think there is a lot that can be done. There's a lot that we can actually create standards for, where the industries outside Europe also can adhere to, whether it's around the data standards or around the technology standards to communicate with each other, around digital identity for machines. And I think that's an area that I think has a lot of scope. Just to add to one of the points which I think Jochen mentioned, yes, banking and financial sector has a lot of regulations and should be regulated rightfully, but to offer competitive products to the customers, we also need a sort of sandbox so that we can try new areas, try defining products, and even in a regulated but an open space, try these ideas with the customers, which is something in Europe exists only in the UK, and that's only in Europe for the next couple of months probably. But beyond that, for continental Europe, I think it's time to think how we can provide that sort of technological sandbox with customers to try new ideas.
Fabian, would you have another recommendation for public authorities to further enable European AI development from your side, from your experience, your daily work?
Yeah, I mean, it would be easy to say that we should just loosen the GDPR. I mean, that was always
it's an easy one, yeah.
So I'm not going that far down. But I mean, there are different aspects to how to really benefit from data and from AI on the technological base, on the service base. We also need the business models. And that also includes, among still other things, also the regulatory frameworks we are working in. And for instance, for the finance industry, what I actually hope for, my understanding as an outsider, to be honest, is that for cloud infrastructures, for the usage of such services, you're required to have complex certification processes, and to deal with the regulatory requirements. What we have in other sectors, and that should be applied to the regulatory bodies, for instance, in the finance sector, we have some kind of a shortcut. I mean, you can have a full-blown certificate or a full-fledged certification process, but if you're already complied to a standard like the ones we are relying on or introducing with GAIA, then we assume, or we certainly know that you are complying to certain qualities and compliance standards, and then we can have a shortcut process to allow you to use cloud services, and that is what I hope for a lot of regulated industries like finance, but maybe even more for healthcare or the energy sector and others.
Claire, is there anything you would want to add from your perspective to that?
Yeah, maybe just to wrap up a little bit on the driving force coming from the public sector. I would just want to say but just joined this industry quite recently, but I've been working for finance for years, and I'm really impressed on how the German government is pushing the AI strategy, and not only with principles and with a human-centric approach, but also with funds. I mean, there are today, if you want to run or to develop AI-based projects, possibility to get finance from the state, and it goes fast. I have seen it in several projects also outside of the finance industry, and I'm also impressed on how fast the financial authorities are moving, because they are very far in their implementation of AI, and I see this from an infrastructure perspective, and I have more projects going on there right now than with banks.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay.
that's something which surprised me at the beginning, which I definitely see as something very positive.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's a nice outlook. And actually, we're running out of time already. I'd just like to take a short, very brief final round with all of you. And Stefan, I have your picture on the right in front, so I start with you. I'd like to ask all of you to complete this one sentence. 12 months from now, I expect. Stefan, we start with you. We need your micro again. Yes. Okay. There we are. No problem. No problem. Okay. 12 months from now, I expect
that we really made a big leap ahead, and we implement projects that make here our region, but Germany also really visible in AI as a leader globally.
Mm-hmm. Shiv.
12 months from now, I expect that people in the finance industry actually understand what really AI is and what requires to implement that, which is the data. So instead of just talking about pushing AI, actually try and bring the data and the data standards to a certain level that we can use it further.
Mm-hmm. Fabian.
So 12 months from now, I at least hope, and I also expect that we will have caught up in the second half of digitization when it comes to B2B business. And from my own vanity, I also hope that people will look back and say, hey, this was a very smart move those guys at GAIA did a year back.
Well, we certainly hope so. Claire.
Yeah, well, my punchlines have been taken by the previous participants.
It's been said all.
Yeah, you have to go first in that kind of situation. So I would say, so let's get away a little bit from AI in finance. I just hope we would be meeting together and now hitting the buffet instead of being all in a virtual meeting. But definitely, I fully agree with what's been said precedently. I really hope that there will be a big leap in the adoption of AI in finance in both the public and private sector in Germany. And I think we're on a good way to do it.
All right, Jochen, last sentence to you.
Yeah, I hope that the FBDC is really becoming a lively ecosystem and maybe also sandbox environment. So we all meet again, but collaborating, like Deutsche Bank, SAP, NVIDIA, and the fintech industry, and also the supervisors collaborating on this, learning and creating new stuff, being creative. I think this is really nice.
Thank you very much. We should probably meet in 12 months from now again and see what has happened. Well, let's close here. Time has run out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for participating today. And well, I hope we have been able to share some new and valuable insights with you. May innovative ability and innovation performance, as well as collaboration, foster new business opportunities and trust in digital business in Europe. And as we say, better together. Thank you very, very much, panelists. Great to have you had you here, I should say, and for taking part and for all your open and worthwhile contributions. And if you've liked the panel, ladies and gentlemen, maybe you'd like to join us on our social media channels on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter. And you might also want to pencil down one date, and that's the next big Frankfurt Digital Finance Conference. That's going to take place in 4.5 months from now on Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021. Well, last but not least, I do want to draw your attention to an event of one of our cooperation partners that is taking place tonight. That is the FinTech Germany Award, and that is starting its broadcast just about these minutes. And if you're interested in that, you can simply dial in on fintechgermanyawards.de and also watch that. I think we're all excited who's going to be among the winners tonight. Well, thanks again to my panelists, and well, keep in touch. Bye-bye. Have a very nice evening, and see you back at Frankfurt Digital Finance. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Corinna. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank
It was a
you.
pleasure. Great.